Hi there, welcome. This is the Kelly's Astrology podcast, where you can find insight, guidance, and understanding through astrology. I'm Kelly, and I'll be your host.
Hey there, everyone, and welcome back for a very special episode of the Kelly's Astrology podcast. Today, I am joined by my dear friend and colleague, Alicia Yusuf. Welcome, Leash. It's great to be here with you.
Hey, Kel. So nice to be here too.
I know we have been chatting astrology and life for a few decades together now, so this feels very familiar. I know we shouldn't say that. Just a couple of years. And today's episode, I'm really excited about this idea that you kind of brought to the table, which is about making friends with malefics. And I know when we were doing our back and forward about what will we talk about, that was where we started. That was our original inspiration. And then we kind of narrowed that down, or you narrowed it down, I should say, beautifully. So to focusing in on Saturn and really, I guess, inspired by Saturn in Aries. So tell us a little bit more about how that concept is an inspiration for you in your work.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you know, Kel, I have a chart that is very empowered, what shall we say, by malefics. And so I have had a lot of personal work with malefics, so we're talking Mars and Saturn here. They are known as malefic because of their wry energy, and they're the opposite of that ability to kind of live life. Well, I know in traditional astrology, there's so much around harshness or the challenges or the limitations of both Mars and Saturn. And so I often have clients coming to me, and I'm sure you do as well, going, oh my God, Saturn transit's coming up, my life's going to fall apart. And look, it's not easy, but there's so much that can be juice that can be squeezed from these transits and these opportunities that I guess I wanted to come on and talk a bit about this and the possibilities with this, and some amazing chart examples, me with my Scorpio energy. To the deep dive.
Your research is always impressive. And when you said through the chart examples, I was like, oh gosh, this is going to be so fun to talk about. But it sounds a little bit like, based on your own chart and then your work with clients, that a lot of your focus has been on making friends with Saturn, say. And I think, you and I are of like mind in that regard where, Saturn transits, yeah, sure that they may be heavy, there may be some challenges, things can get complicated, but they don't have to be, the end of you kind of thing.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And, hilariously, my school that I went to, their motto was actually Veraspera ad Astra, which is the same as NASA's, when it means through struggles to the stars.
Oh my gosh, great. Let's just say that again. So through struggle to the stars was the motto of the high school that you went to in Sydney. And that's the same motto that NASA uses for their space programs. Wowzers.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that a girls' school in Sydney has the same motto as NASA. That's fantastic.
Yes. Miss Medway, who started the school, was actually a really amazing human. So I thought that was very suitable for not only my chart, but my current profession now too. So
yes.
And I think Saturn is that great teacher of cosmic truth. And it's that idea that, yes, we may meet frustrations, obstacles, setbacks with Saturn, but it also teaches us perseverance. It teaches us relentlessness. It teaches us patience, and patience is such a key word for Saturn in Aries.
So, yeah, I think, yes, Saturn teaches us, it brings Saturn transits particularly, or, Saturn's presence in your birth chart, if it's really influential, can just bring a lot of clarity or a willingness to engage with things as they are, whether it's enjoyable or not. And that persistence, perseverance, it's almost like out of Saturn comes resilience, if you like.
Yes, exactly. And, I've got a background in early childhood as well. And there was something I remember talking to a lot of parents about is we can make our children happy, stupider by, clearing the path for them, or we can make them resilient by letting them deal with obstacles themselves. And I think it's the same with Saturn transits. You know, when a resilient child is going to be a child that creates their own happiness down the track, rather than being one that expects to have it handed to them. Or so that's what I often talk to clients about. It's like, it's teaching you that you can do things. It's teaching you that you can do the hard things.
Yeah.
Like
that you can manage yourself through a hard situation.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Yeah. And you mentioned too this idea of patience, and that being a really important thing with Saturn in Aries, because that particular combination is, you know, it's a bit uncomfortable for Saturn, isn't it? And there's a real maybe tension between the quick of Aries versus the slow and methodical of Saturn.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Demetra George, I was doing her course last year, and she talks about, you know, planets in signs, how easily are they able to access the resources that feel right or suit their temperament. And so Saturn needs things to be slow, needs things to be cautious, needs to be strategic, whereas Aries is the toddler who is just running around, not thinking about where they're going, bumping into stuff, you know, all high energy and not a lot of thought. And so for Saturn, it's like, well, how do I go slow here? How do I, you know, do things in a methodical way? How do I have clarity when I'm, you know, just running at things head first? I think I told you about this example. I do something called circle work. I know you were trained in it too. But as a somatic therapist, I find it really helpful for clients to, like, you put the chart down on the floor and then you get people do a process where people stand in the chart and hold, so, you know, either the transit or what's in their birth chart. And so I did this myself with Saturn in Aries because I've got strong Aries placements. And I was kind of expecting to feel like really weighted down and really heavy or kind of pushed backwards. But instead, there was just this real centering and grounding. There was this anchoring of Saturn. And I went, oh man, this feels good, actually. It was like a relief from always running at things with my head. I bought some new running shoes recently, and I normally go for the light as air things that make you run. I don't run, I walk or bike. But this time I went for the stable ones because you know, for my weightlifting, and it's really changed the way I just am present in the world too, which is fascinating.
I love that. So you're really talking about how, as a person who has some placements in Aries in your chart, the transit of Saturn in Aries is kind of that rock or that grounding influence that, while it seems like you might have been scared of it before it, like on the approach, before it arrived, as you've had a chance to kind of engage with it somatically, sort of through the body, through the energy, it's actually felt calming because it's like it's giving you permission to not have to rush. That's like everything doesn't have to be such an emergency.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so I can be more patient with things, and, you know, let's be honest, the world was sped up. But all that, you know, and
yes,
at the time of recording, we've only got less than 2 weeks before Jupiter moves into Leo too. So, you know, everything from Jupiter out will be in these fire and air signs. It's things have sped up. And I think that's where we can look at Saturn in Aries and go, okay, that's actually the handbrake, or that's the thing. You know, good thinking about it as well. The other analogy I'm using is like it's here in Australia with these hollowed up cars for, you know, Lorde and GH and
that's
other names. And it's like grandpa trying to teach, you know, the teenager boy to drive, and all the boy wants to do is put his foot to the accelerator, and all granddad's doing is pulling on the handbrake. So there can be that fourth of it.
Yes.
But I think it's finding that sweet spot with it too of, okay, well, what is grounding me? What is anchoring me? What's teaching me to be patient?
This is so beautiful, Leash. And like how we can bring in that wisdom of like things developing over time and that being worth the wait of Saturn. And, you know, when we were talking before about Saturn and like malefic planets, Mars, I was also like just reflecting on how, you know, Saturn in Aries is technically like like it's Saturn ruled by Mars. So, I mean, that's part of what we're getting at when we're talking about the Aries themes versus the Saturn themes. But just that, like, that extra friction. And one of the keywords I always think about malefic planets is that they take things to extremes. And so that idea of like Saturn in Aries, it's like a planet that is already inclined to sort of maybe extreme something or other. And now it's ruled by a planet that's going to extremes, but like you said, maybe in the other direction. And so how can we find that middle point between the extreme slow of Saturn or the extreme fast of Mars and Aries? What's the sweet spot of a pacing that feels like it's fast enough for movement, but it's not so fast that we are like maybe not ready, or we're breaking things along the way?
Yeah, 100%. That's really well put, Cal. And I think, a mantra I'm offering to clients at the moment is go slow to go fast. In that if you're doing things too fast, and I'm a member of that club, you make mistakes. You've got to go back and fix things. Whereas if you just, I'm finding for me, meditation and breath work is my sweet spot in this, on getting out in nature, so but it's interesting, in some of these charts to talk about how different people have done it different ways too. But I think it's really like finding what works for you to help just harness that Saturn anchoring or grounding, because this is the fire that could burn for a very long time. If you think about Saturn as that long term.
Pouring it out. Yeah.
Exactly. So it doesn't have to be the strike of Aries. It can be that long burning fire that can keep going after the fact for a while too.
Oh my gosh, I love it. As you're talking, it reminds, like, the idea of going slow to go fast. It reminded me of a quote from Modern Family, which is, I don't know if you ever watched that show. Peter and I got into it in COVID, and it's just been a comfort show. But one of the characters, Phil Dunphy, he had this saying that was, and I had to just quickly Google it, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And it's kind of like what you're saying, that, even though it sounds contradictory, slowing things down is how you get to fast. And I don't know if you remember this from Sports Leash back in the day at school, where I was always taught that if you're trying to learn a new skill, which ultimately ends up as something that's fast, you have to be slow to be accurate. And once if you can be accurate while you're being slow, then you can work on increasing your speed while maintaining your accuracy. But it's very hard to be fast and accurate straight out of the gate. And so all of this is feeding into what you're saying, is that even though it sounds like a contradiction in terms, starting off slow is often what helps you build the skills, or in classic Saturn language, the foundation, the muscle memory, or just the skill set that allows you to, over time, be fast and efficient, essentially.
Yeah, 100%. And so, I had the same, I did dance. So, when you're learning choreography, you do it slowly. You don't do it with the music. You just kind of step through and you get them into that muscle memory and into the body, and then you do it faster and faster. I love it, Kel. Yeah.
Yeah, well, just something you said with that slow is fast. And oh my gosh, that is so true. And speaking of slow and fast, I know some of your examples are going to take us into that space.
Yes.
Do you want to just go through them one by one? I mean, how do you want to approach the charts? Because these are such great example charts that I haven't spent a lot of time with myself. So I'm really looking forward to looking at some fresh charts and hearing from you about them.
Well, one of the things, so I'll just list the charts. One of the things I really noticed as I dived into some of them. So by Pearce, he's an Australian actor, but he was internationally known. So I'm hoping, most of your audience know what I'm talking about.
And if you don't give him a Google, you'll definitely have seen some of his movies for sure.
Yeah. LA Confidential was one he was really well known for.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's an Aquarius rising, 2 degrees with Saturn at 8. And Saturn's also opposite his sun in Libra. So
Yep.
it does play a really important role in his world, especially with that sun ruling his descendant. He's had a life of challenge. His father died when he moved to Australia from England when he was 3, and his father was a test pilot, and he was unfortunately killed.
Hang on a second. His dad was like a fighter test pilot. Somebody, right?
We don't know if it was jets, but yeah, a test pilot. So
For planes.
he got killed in an accident when I was 8, and he had this very stoic, Northern English mother. And he said the only time he ever saw her cry was that day.
Oh.
But, he was someone who really loved to do things on his own. And he loved weightlifting as a teen because it was an opportunity to do something on his own. And he'd love to, as he said, to prove himself, to push himself against things. So such Saturn in Aries, like this solid independence, this master of independence in a way, of I can do things. And he was saying as well, he doesn't make friends with men easily. He doesn't love these blokey bots, So I think that's also that opposite of it. Of Saturn in Aries is like, because Saturn can be what we fear or what we're uncomfortable with. So for him, that more Aries style masculinity was not a comfortable thing too. So, but I think he said, in earlier interviews, he really suffered from imposter syndrome and hated the whole celebrity cult. He said he would always sign autographs and be polite, but it was never something he was comfortable with, which says so much about planet in its detriment, and a malefic planet that feels like, should I even be here? What deserves this? And he's actually a master actor. He's stage actor, film, television. I mean, he started on Neighbours. That was his big kind of break.
Yes. Which is where so many actors coming out of Australia begin, if not Neighbours, Home and Away.
I'm not Margot Robbie.
That's the thing. People, it's where actors in Australia, I'm like, who's the big actress that's doing so well? Margot Robbie out there at the moment.
Yeah.
No, this is so interesting. So Guy Pearce, and I know all the charts you've picked are people with Saturn in Aries, and they also have either a Capricorn or an Aquarius ascendant. So that Saturn in Aries is, we already know straight out of the gate with the charts you picked, it's important and extra significant because it rules the ascendant. And then, so Guy Pearce, Saturn opposite the sun. Wow. This is really interesting.
When he does say, I really like my independence, he was talking about how the only thing he really regrets, he said, I wish I could go back and not be the anxious child that I was, and I've spent the first 25 years of my life just trying to survive human interaction. So not only is this Saturn ruling his first house, but it's also Saturn opposing the ruler of his 7th, where he has lots of people out in the world. So this Saturn just had so much play, and I think he's the kind of guy who would survive well on a desert island as long as he had books and, maze and things like that, and I think you see this in so many of these examples. They're people who do really well on their own, or they have intense shyness, or, that sense of where do I fit in the world, which says a lot about for that inner detriment.
Yeah, I think what some of the very classically Saturnian thing that you're bringing up here with Guy Pearce as the example is like that solitary kind of lone wolf theme. I think, and especially as you've said, Saturn in Aries opposes his sun in Libra, which is the ruler of the 7th. So it's sort of that solitary, like, how do I do partnership here when I'm not comfortable in myself, so it might be easier for me not to do partnership.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's had interesting partnerships and, married his childhood sweetheart and, they split up, and he said, that was things that he did. And he wishes, in some ways he wished for years that he could go back and fix that. And, he's just recently come up with his second long-term relationship. He's single now. So it's interesting. He's Saturn in Aries is definitely that master of, okay, I can do it on my own. It's okay.
Yeah. Whether it's like too extreme or not, it is definitely the doing it on its own for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And Lorde and Zendaya, these are two women from the 1990s, Saturn in Aries.
Yep.
Yeah, so Zendaya, they're both actually 96, Zendaya September, and Lorde in November. Lorde in particular, both of them had fame early in their life. So Lorde is a Capricorn rising with Jupiter conjunct the ascendant. 100% sure she's an A-rated. And then Zendaya is an Aquarius rising. And Zendaya is just this extremely personal, private person. She just doesn't put much out there. She doesn't live her private life in the spotlight. And, she's known for just being really resilient and doing things on her own. I think that's another thing, Saturn's nature is to endure. And I love that angsty quote of Saturn in Aries: if you get tired, learn to rest, not quit. That's so much for Saturn in Aries of like,
let's just say that again. If you get tired, learn to rest and not quit. That seems very appropriate.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, Zendaya with her ability to just get things done, and she's really well respected for her craft.
Right. So that sort of high standard or that maybe like heightened work ethic that comes through for her.
Yeah. Yeah. So we don't know a lot about her because she doesn't talk a lot about her private life. Especially not as an adult. She did more as a teen. But yeah, I think, you just get that sense that she can do well on her own too. She, even in her character, she's got that quirky Aquarian character, which, she went to she went to the casting for Spider-Man with no makeup on, which is completely against it. And that's the role that she played, and that's the role, and that's what they did on the movie, was they just really made her this almost, I don't want to say masculine, in a way, she and Lorde are like this. Lorde's the same. Whenever Lorde goes on tour now or does anything, they're like, bring me as you would a man. Like, I want to have all the slippery, all the, the frills and which is so much has like trait, isn't it?
So they don't want any of that extra. Do you mean with like hair and makeup? They just want to, like, they don't want to have to take that extra time any more than a guy would, basically.
Yeah. I mean, wears waistcoats and pants now. So, it's like, I don't want to wear skirts. I'm not a girly girl. I never have been. The image was put out there that I was. And they talk a lot. Lorde talks a lot about find a long time to fit into themselves and into their body. It's interesting with the square. Saturn in Aries saying, am I comfortable in who I am? Because I'm going to force myself. And so now they went through a time of eating addiction really taking over their life in 2022, 2023. So, they're out the other side of that with some really great treatment and therapy. And I think that shows with hard work, with lots of effort, you can get to that point where you know who you are. But Saturn in Aries, all planets in their fall or their detriment take work to get to understand, but Saturn especially.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And the idea that, a planet in detriment or fall, we have the technical way of understanding that, which is often just sort of sometimes heard as like a negative or a bad thing, but there's so much more nuance to it than that. And one interpretive principle that I love for planets in detriment or fall is the idea of them being atypical in some way. And like, particularly when we're talking about, Saturn in Aries that has a connection to like body or appearance or sense of self, because it's the ruler of the ascendant, that idea of in what ways am I aware that I might be different or want to make choices that might be considered different compared to the society or culture in which I live? And how can I kind of give myself permission to do that? And these lovely stories about Zendaya and Lorde that you're sharing about how when they were younger and they were kind of thrust out into the spotlight with people having created an image or a persona for them and them kind of having the strength or the inner kind of fortitude to sort of say, actually, that isn't me, if you like. That is not the truth about who I am. And if I can be myself, it might look more like this, even if that's different from what you'd expect, or what, if it's like labels and when I say labels, I mean like record labels. They're like, well, we want you to look like this because it'll sell. And they're like, but that's not being true to me.
Exactly. Yeah. And if we think, even in Hollywood and the music industry, being thin's status symbol. And so for a lot of women actually just live with eating addiction stuff. Because that's how they feel like they need to. But Lorde could see how it was taking over her life and her creativity. And this was the thing. She was like, I'm not going to sacrifice that. Like, all I can think about is my body and food. So, that ability to then do the really hard work, which was, a couple of years of really intense therapy, including EMDR and MDMA therapy, when it's come out the other side a lot healthier. And it's fascinating, actually, that this is all happening right before their, actually, that would have been right as they were coming into their Saturn return.
So interesting. And as you said, in Lorde's case with Capricorn rising, the Saturn in Aries makes that square aspect. So it's just got a little bit more of that direct connection, even more so. So fascinating. And how for her, it was sort of a choice between, it's either like this struggle with my body or with disordered eating versus my creativity, and I want to choose my creativity. And I love that in her chart, it's not exact by degree, but it looks like she has Venus in Libra with the Saturn in Aries. So it's a little bit separated, but it does sort of play into that sort of axis of decision-making around. It feels like it's one or the other. And I mean, if I had a choice, I'd go with that Venus in Libra for sure. I'd be like, what is going to help the art, the creativity, the thing that like helps you be with beauty and bring beauty into the world?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it's
so interesting.
It's interesting with these two. Another one. So next is interesting footballer that my husband pointed out to me. And so Paolo Maldini. Now I'm not a massive football fan, but of course the World Cup is on right now, so who can avoid it?
Yes.
But, he's considered the best defender ever. And although I think it's highly contested from what I've heard, he is another trap rising with Saturn in Aries. Well, a lot of planets in Cancer kind of balancing that out, which is interesting in his 7th. But he played with the same club for 25 years, AC Milan. Well, he was really well known for his flawless tactical intelligence. And this is interesting because if you think about Aries, it's such a just rush at things, just get in there. You almost think Aries would be a striker. But, he was a defender.
Absolutely.
Creating that wall.
Yes.
And what he would say, so he didn't have these reckless tackles. He would get in there if he had to, but he would watch the game and almost have this prescience about where the game was going because he was able to lean into the strategy that Saturn brought him. To be able to do that of like, okay, well, what's the long term? Let's project into that here. What's the strategy that's at play here? And then he could do it. And he always said, if you have to make a tackle, then you have to make a mistake. And so he was like, okay, I don't want to tackle. And he had this really fancy footwork too, which I could, the quickness of Aries, he became a
totally.
So, I feel like he was one of those people who kind of naturally knew how to harness his energy. And again, he was kind of brought out of, he was just playing in a village in the street with his friends. He wasn't even really necessarily wanting this big football career. And it just, when it came to him, but he was another one, didn't love the celebrity cult. Stepped back from it too. So, yeah, but I love the defender in an Aries like arena of sport.
Totally. And, that Saturn in the context of like sports, like attacking and defending, Saturn, of course, is the defense. It's the back line. It's the goalie. And yeah, that you can just sort of visualize it, can't you? Like the defender staying back, watching the game. Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's a chart that makes me want to go and spend a lot more time with it to like understand, so much there. But I think it's also really great for some people listening to take, because I know there's a big concern with students and people learning about their own charts, thinking, I have this technically problematic planet or what have you. Does this mean that I'm doomed? And you've just shared an example of a gentleman who has become like internationally successful in a field that he loves, playing soccer. And he has his ascendant ruled by Saturn in Aries. And so I think all the examples you're using are people who have had, success. We're talking about them because they are well known because of a talent or a skill that they have, either connected to the Saturn in Aries or in spite of it. And I think this is really good for people to understand that a planet that's in challenging condition can describe challenges you face along your way, but in and of itself, it is not like a permanent blockage to everything. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Well, all of these people had to climb obstacles and have become stronger on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And it's finding their own way. I think with Lorde and Zendaya, absolutely. It's like you can be yourself. Aries is like this almost, you can't help but be yourself. It's such a irrepressible, sort of focused toddler style energy with Aries. It's like, if you don't do that, you'll actually struggle.
Yes.
And probably get over that shyness or, because Lorde, it was literally debilitating stage fright that she had to get past as well through this therapy. And she's much more comfortable on stage now, but because she did that hard work. And I'm excited to see what's coming out because she's doing the tour right now. And I'm excited to see what will come out of this tour, which is her Saturn return. What will come out the other side of that and how she feels about that and her creativity too. And, Paolo Maldini, I think he teaches us that if you can find the right way to like let Saturn at it in a way, let that Saturn in Aries at it, life can flourish in other ways too.
Yes. Well, and I think if we take, like, he's a defender, on a sports field, and you said that you shared about his strategy was like sort of watching and waiting, like not rushing out to take the tackle before you need to it, waiting to see if it's like essential. And I think that is that could be a really useful motto with Saturn in Aries. Like, don't preempt the need for something that may not turn out to be necessary. Like, don't let that Aries kind of, pick your battles. There you go. That's a much more eloquent way to set it. Pick your battles. Yeah. That's a great one. So that's what he's doing in that context of sports. I love that.
Yes.
I feel like I'm getting so many lessons that I'm going to use for my experience with Saturn in Aries. I don't have any planets in Aries. I'm not a super heavy cardinal chart, but of course, like everybody, Aries is a particular house in my chart. It's a set of topics that I'm grappling with, as we all would be, based on wherever Aries is for each of us. So pick your battles and don't kind of fight if you don't have to, basically.
Exactly. And be strategic.
That's very Saturn, isn't it?
Through with this. Exactly. I've just thought through this with my Mars-ruled child, as you know, Kel.
Yeah.
And, having some trouble at school, and it was a really great lesson about strategy over the last week and what it means, how if you don't rush in at things, you just think and you just show up authentically, what can happen. So,
I love it.
Such an activist energy too. And I think the inner activist in many of us is looking at the world around us going, what can I do? And I think this is where Saturn goes, pick your battle.
Yes.
Not fight the fights right now. What's the fight that's most important? What are you most talented or skilled with? Where is, choose, because there is a lot happening right now. And we do need to kind of go and push back. But where are you going to push back?
I love this. And that idea, sometimes when I'm trying to figure out what do I do with like the helping out at a collective level or at an activism cause, and sometimes particularly I'm thinking about Saturn in Aries, of course, I'm like, what really angers me the most? Like what, because there's so many things that of course every issue is heartbreaking, but there are always one or two issues that do something inside you more deeply than others. And I think those are the things that, the thing that breaks your heart the most, that pisses you off the most, that makes you the most angry, just pick that one. And then, like you said, play the long game with it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Because in many ways, this is a generational pushback. It is not going to happen overnight. And we need to learn to be strategic.
Yeah.
We need to learn to focus on where we're going and what we're doing.
Marathon, not a sprint, right, Leishi?
Exactly. Talking about marathons.
Okay, nice. Yeah, so that's a good segue. Where are we going? I don't even know which chart that leads to.
Well, King Frederik of Denmark. So Frederik X. And he is a Capricorn rising with Saturn in Aries, and it's square. And what's interesting is Saturn is conjunct the North Node too, which says a lot to me.
Right, square and the ascendant by degree. Got it. Yep.
Yeah. And, of course, he's something from his family. He was the crown prince. And so next thing he's become king, but he is intensely shy. Wow. Again, another one of those. When he had, as a child, he struggled to cope with royal life. I think his father was very strict, very patriarchal. Yeah. And so he's actually done his restricted wife, Mary, to really help him.
The only reason some Australians know about the Danish royals.
Exactly. So he is unusual. Again, he's atypical among the European monarchy, because he has this real rugged athletic background.
Oh, yes.
So he is a marathon runner, still is now, but he's a sailor too. And so he actually met Mary at the 2000 Olympic Games here in Australia.
In Sydney, where Alicia and I are from.
Yes. They met at the Slip Inn, where we have had many a night.
Down the street.
Oh my God.
That's right. He was sailing for Denmark, wasn't he?
Denmark.
Yes.
Yeah. And so he actually gave up his Olympics visions for his relationship with Mary.
I didn't know that part.
I know. I didn't either until I was doing a bit of research. Because it was either, he had to be king. It was always going to happen. So it was either the kingship and the Olympics and sport, or the kingship and so he chose that. But, he was on the IOC for years. He still runs marathons all the time. He was a real partier in his youth. He was known for his fast cars, and in Aries.
Yes.
His womanizing. He really settled down with Mary. But yet he is the first royal in the world to successfully complete an Ironman triathlon.
That is no joke. There's no cheating in Ironman triathlons. Do you want to run the numbers on one of these, Leash? Do you know what they are off the top of your head?
No.
Okay, someone in the comments will correct us, but it's something like, it's approximately a 3.8 kilometer swim, 160, 70, the bike I can never remember, but it's like over 150 kilometers.
180 kilometers.
80 bike riding. And then you run a marathon of 42.2 Ks after doing all of that. Ironman triathlon is, the training for that it's phenomenal. We have a dear friend who's done things like that. And so that's why I'm like, that's not regular triathlons. That's serious business. Yeah.
And that shows that resilience. This isn't just Aries. This is something Aries.
Well, it also, we talked about malefics and taking things to extremes. I'm like, that is taking the Sunday run situation to a pretty extreme level. It's not for everybody. I know it's not for me. I don't mind a swim or a run. I'm not a big fan of a bike ride, but I'm not doing those distances. So taking to extremes, that's next level.
So he is a royal. He's done this. And he also has extensive military training in all three services. So he didn't just do one. He's done Army, Navy, and Air Force. We're elite. Like he became, I think he's got a name of Pingwo, because he was frogman, in the Navy.
In like the special services.
That's it.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
With his wetsuit full of water and walk like a penguin. So he's the big.
So this is such a great example of someone who's just anywhere they can. What is the most extreme challenge, and especially because this is another one of the cap risings with Saturn in Aries. So that idea, I really want to test my body or test, when you get into, marathon and extreme length physical activity, it becomes as much a mind game as it does a physical game. This is, I didn't know anything about him. I just know he's married to Mary. So this is very interesting, Leash.
No. Well, also, what I find interesting about he and Mary too, their kids are, in their teens, and I think the eldest of Crown Prince is 20 now. And everyone talks about Kate and Will doing the normal parenting, but they did it first.
It's true.
They get to take the kids, and it's not as big a deal, of course, in Denmark because they view their role differently, but they would even take their kids to school in those cargo bikes.
Oh, yeah, the bikes that are so popular in European countries where you just bung the kids in the back and you pedal them all off to the school.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. So that was the kind of stuff they did. So he and Mary really pushed back, and he's going for a modern monarchy in Denmark, where things are more approachable, and he wants to be with the everyday man. So it's less of that authority of Capricorn, like I'm sitting up on my throne away from
firearms. Yeah.
I want to be down with the everyday. I want to be here with people. So he and Mary both really loved for that. And actually they're bringing the monarchy back into much more favor in Denmark because of it. So, yeah.
So interesting. It does. We don't have to do this now on our podcast, but it does make me go, oh, I'm intrigued to find out more about his father and the ways in which that Saturn, because of course, if it's cap rising with Saturn in Aries, it is in the whole sign fourth. And so the threads there. But even just as you say, the idea that he was born into an inherited title monarchy situation where his job literally comes from his position at birth, basically.
Yeah.
Super interesting. I think you've saved one of the juiciest charts for last, haven't you?
Dave Grohl.
Yeah.
Yes, I had.
I think this might be intentional.
So for all Nirvana, Foo Fighter fans out there, Dave Grohl too is a Capricorn rising with Saturn in Aries. And again, it's in a tight square to his chart too. And something I want to say here about Saturn is, it's the skeleton in the body. And we can't build muscle unless we have something to push off. So this idea of Saturn in Aries, it's like we can get speed if we have a good skeleton, a good foundation to be able to build our muscles off, to be able to push off. So I think that's why it's interesting, these quite tight squares between these top rising Saturn in Aries is these are people who, despite the challenges that they've had or despite the issues that they've had, they've pushed off and come into frame. And Dave Grohl's a sun too. So, he has the sun square Saturn. In his chart too. He's a 24.
Yeah.
Capricorn. So, yeah, very, very interesting chart. And look, as we know, he is a self-taught musician who actually can't read musical notation, which I thought was fascinating. I did not know that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So he is self-taught. He's going to do things my way. And he plays just like ear. So, of course, he was in Nirvana. He was in Nirvana when Kurt Cobain sadly took his own life. And I think that really shaped him. And he just always had that creative control after that, because he loved Nirvana and he loved the music that they did. And so he talks about spending 9 months he just wandered the world on his own. And he just had to kind of find his own way. And he talks about being in Ireland and he's like, I couldn't find my way back. And he said, I was just driving around Ireland going, how do I get back to the life I used to live? And he was coming down the road and there was a hitchhiker on the side of the road wearing a Nirvana t-shirt. But he went, I don't have to find a way back. I make my own way back. Just do it. Which is such an Aries energy that just do it. But, for him, he had to go through the Saturnian darkness and really face the challenges of it to carve his own way. And so he came back, he wrote and then recorded the first Foo Fighter album. He played all the instruments, I think, except on one song himself, 15 tracks.
Oh my God, I didn't know that. I mean, this is very Aries independent, like the Saturn in Aries, the solo, if, I have to do it, I'll do it myself, or I'll do it my way kind of thing. Fascinating.
Yeah. Well, Saturn, especially at Capricorn rising, Sun in Capricorn, they're quite serious, potentially melancholic individuals, but he's known for this almost giddy, like enthusiasm. And, he's worked with a whole heap of bands. He's done a lot of collaborations. And it's because of this Russian energy that he has, because he just loves his music so much. And I think that he does have a moon in Sag. So I'm sure that adds to the energy.
That definitely will lighten the influence for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it speaks so much to Saturn in Aries too, of this irrepressible energy. It's not just that, I'm going to go and go and go. It's like, I'm excited about this, and that's what's going to drive me forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That energy, that enthusiasm. And I think too, when you described him kind of wandering sort of for 9 years, I feel like that's also 9 months. Yes, the wandering part.
Yeah.
I feel like that is really connected to, a planet in fall, a planet in detriment. That idea of being, either brought down from high to a low place or being in unfamiliar territory, and that being part of the story, but not the end of the story,
It's exactly.
So much of how I think about charts and lives and the stories they describe is actually connected to the stories, that I read, but also of the lives of people that I know, where those darker low points, and if you think about even the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's work, the low point isn't the end of the story. It's like an important turning point midway through. It's not where you stop. And so I think that's really interesting. Dave Grohl has always really intrigued me as a character, to know that he's been in like 2 hugely successful musical ensembles, bands, but also the tragedy that he suffered, and experienced, like, being in the band with Kurt Cobain and the suicide and going through that, and then finding his way back to himself, as you said, knowing that he maybe had the answers within himself. So interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember Deb Rolding talking about planets in their fall. It's like, you can't go any lower, so in a way, the only way is up. And if you're willing to do the work, the kind of, like you were talking about in the hero's journey, well, how do I come out the other side?
Yes.
And I always think Luke Skywalker training with Yoda. Yeah, such a well, this is the work to come out the other side. That's a very Saturn and Aries energy, study with a master, this martial arts of,
Well, and the Yoda message, which is very Saturn and Aries too, do or do not do. There is no try.
Oh, great kill.
That's one of my favorites.
Yes.
Yes. And and that idea of, that's a beautiful piece that you're sharing via Deb, holding around the idea of like the low point or fall. Like the idea of the fall is that you've come to the bottom, and then it's like, who's going, like, how will I move from here? What resources can I draw on? What even small step can I take forward? And that story you shared about Dave Grohl was really beautiful to help illustrate that.
Yeah. And of course, we do know Dave Grohl has had his issues around infertility and that going on. So, of course, none of these are perfect. I mean, there are rumors around King Frederik too, and that impulsivity that Aries has, I think Zach definitely has trouble getting rein on that. So, to say to people, keep an eye out for that too. But the quiet resilience, the ability to push through and be patient and, kind of put the reins on the impulsiveness of that Saturn area, that Aries area of your chart. Is a real opportunity under Saturn in Aries.
Yeah, because we've done a deep dive on these people's charts who are living with Saturn in Aries as a lifelong trend, and now go through many facets and shades of that over the course of their lifetime. But most of us who don't have Saturn in Aries, we get these sort of 2.5 to 3 year immersions in Saturn in Aries vibes, and then we go on to other things. And so what you're sort of pointing out there, Leash, is that there can be a tendency to be a bit reactive or a bit impulsive with Saturn in Aries, and learning to kind of rein yourself in and maybe not go for that first, craving, like, oh, I want this and I deserve it. Yeah. Bring a little bit of that maturity in there. Like, are there any consequences to this? Is there a price that I'm going to pay in the future? Is that a price I'm willing to pay? Obviously, as an adult, you get to make your own choices, but just to be more aware of that. I think I really feel like the Saturn in Aries is like an action consequence. It sort of brings clarity to the through line between what is done and then what transpires down the road, such that, and I know you and I have talked about Saturn transits off and on for such a long time, often what we're dealing with now is like a consequence or an outcome of some action we did or didn't take in the past with Saturn in Aries. Yeah.
This is a really, I know we're getting to time, so I'll keep this bit really short, but I was listening to Dr. Zach Stein recently, who's a Harvard philosopher of education, and he was talking about screens in general, including television, but also social media and AI, and their impacts on children's development, especially the brain, on especially the ability to develop regulation, emotional regulation, and even physical regulation. And he's comparing it to underage drinking and underage driving in its seriousness. With adults, it atrophies, but with children, if they don't develop the scaffolding, Saturn will never develop it properly.
Yeah.
So this is, I'm hoping what will happen on the mundane level of Saturn in Aries is, yes, there's all this exciting stuff. And yes, AI is out there. Not that I'm a big lover of AI, but, I know a lot of people are. And it's like, well, actually, let's look at what this will do to all of our ability to regulate ourselves. All of our ability to be able to tolerate and develop patience and just slow because things are speeding up. So
this is such an important point, Leash, because I think I've always thought something about Saturn in Aries is about how do you manage or build your tolerance for discomfort? And what we're talking about with regulation, nervous system regulation, emotional regulation, physical regulation, which many of us learned to a certain degree in childhood, and then your 20s kind of refines it, and then you sort of hopefully have a sense of being able to self-regulate as you power into full adulthood. It is about how well can I tolerate being uncomfortable, and not in a way that's in an abusive territory, not at all. Like, we're talking about regular everyday discomfort of like, I want to, run out of the room here, but I'm in the middle of listening to someone talk or what have you. So I'll just wait 20 minutes and then I'll go, whatever basic things.
Creativity that's born out of boredom. Maybe children can tolerate boredom now. Yeah, and hate it because I force it on them. But, it's like they're both very creative in their own way now. And they're seeing benefits of that, especially my 14-year-old, who's getting to that age. But I think we just don't let kids get bored enough or, that resilience piece we were talking about earlier. So, I think that's for me, my Saturn
piece. But it's so beautiful. And I feel like we could talk about like the value of the discomfort of Saturn in Aries in creating a wonderful human. That could be another 2 hours. But I think that's really good. Do you want to just share what was the piece that you were quoting from with that quote just now? What
so
about
Dr. Zach Stein?
Yep.
He's a Harvard philosopher of education. He's currently advising both the Australian and the Greek government. So just Google ZAK Stein. He did a great podcast recently with Sarah Wilson.
Oh, fantastic!
Yes, about this. It's called the podcast is called Wild.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Leash. Oh my God. I feel like we could keep going for days, but I know I'm going to let you go and get on with your day. How can people find out? Oh my God, my pleasure. Thanks for coming. And we'll have to do it again and maybe do a part 2 looking at Mars. Where can people find out more about you and your work?
I am Alicia Yusuf.com. I best to subscribe to my website. It's my newsletter on my website. I'm not on socials much these days. So yeah, it's the best way to find it.
And you're working with clients with astrology, and you do other things as well. Do you want to share about those?
Yeah, I'm a counselor who specializes in trauma, also just nervous system regulation. And for people who are on the Sunshine Coast, I do ecotherapy as well. So, we get to walk and talk in nature and connect. And yeah, so I also do astrology. I love astrology. So
yes. Oh my gosh, fantastic. So that's aliciayusuf.com. We will put the link in the show notes. Of course, you can find out all about my work over at kellysastrology.com. If you're really interested in today's topics, you might like a webinar I have called Conditions of Maltreatment, which looks at aspects with Mars and Saturn, or another webinar called Working with Planets in Fall, which of course includes info on Saturn in Aries, but other planets in their fall placement as well. And you can find everything at kellysastrology.com. Thanks again, Leash. This was so fun. I look forward to catching up again, and I wish you all the best for the rest of your day and week.
Thanks, lovely.
Okay, bye.
Bye.